In this video, I take my new chainsaw mill to a standing dead tree I had on my property, only to find out it was some gorgeous, gorgeous spalted maple. Stay tuned. What's going on, guys? Brady here with BradyHummel.com. So we recently just bought our house and it's sitting on 12 acres. And most of that 12 acres is some pretty mature hardwoods. There's a lot of oaks, maples, all the normal northeastern hardwoods you'd imagine. And a couple weeks ago, before I made this video, I cut down this standing dead tree. I cut it down for firewood initially, and when I did that, I noticed the end grain was maple, and that it had some spalting running through it. Now, maple is a nice hardwood, but when it gets spalted, it automatically jumps up to one of my favorite hardwoods to work with. Really, any type of spalted wood just sets it apart for me. It automatically is my favorite wood. So when I seen this, I knew I had to find a way to mill it. And the quickest and cheapest option for me was to do that with a chainsaw mill. So I ended up buying a 36-inch Granberg IV chainsaw mill. I'll have an Amazon link in the description if you want to check it out. And I'll also put a little time lapse of me setting it up and installing it on my chainsaw at the end of this video if you're interested and want to see how it goes together. Now, as you can see here, I have two chainsaws. You definitely don't need two chainsaws, but it can be helpful. My larger one, which is a Stihl MS-461, that's stuck on the mill, so I like to have another one to do with crosscuts. So I cut this to about a 10-foot length, and this was a smaller diameter log, so I made a couple stands I could put the log up on, just to have it at a comfortable, workable height. Obviously, with larger logs, you don't have to do this. You wouldn't be able to do this, because it's too heavy. I'm screwing a wood ladder to the top of the log. This is what you will make your first cut with to get your first flat surface. And then you're going to want to go through and measure what depth you want to make the cut at. This is going to depend on what size screws you use to screw your ladder to the tree, because you definitely want to set the depth lower than those screws. You don't want to hit those screws, obviously. Setting the depth on it is super easy. There's 4 total nuts, 2 on each vertical shaft that you just loosen. You set to where you want it, and then you just retighten those. And you can do that all with one tool that you'll see it in a few of the frames coming up. I store right in the top handle. The markings on the mill are very accurate. I checked during the install and was actually quite impressed with how accurate they were. And it's also a good time just to go through and just snug everything up. And another thing I must say, that tool that I'm using to snug everything up with is the exact same tool that comes with my chainsaw. So you can adjust anything on the chainsaw and on the chainsaw mill, which is quite clever that they did that. So then it was time to make my first cut. I let my chainsaw warm up for a couple minutes before sliding it on the ladder and getting started. Now you see here, my right hand is on the vertical handle, and I should have mentioned while we were setting the depth, but you can also adjust this handle to where you're comfortable. And I think that's going to vary for each log. The size of each log will depend on where you adjust it to. Now I know the last thing you guys probably want to hear on a YouTube video is safety, but it's worth mentioning through my own experience to wear hearing protection. You're running a chainsaw at full bore for an extended period of time, so I think it's definitely worth mentioning. Put some headphones in just to protect your ears. It's going to make it a lot more enjoyable too. I didn't have any the first few passes, and I really should have had. So after the first pass was done, I was able to remove the ladder to reveal this beautiful spalted maple grain. This was definitely too nice for firewood. After the ladder is off, the remaining passes can just be made with the mill, because your flat reference is already there from your previous cut. You'll just want to reposition the depth at what thickness you want your lumber. So I did 6/4 on these slabs, which is 1.5 inches. That thickness will just give me some flexibility in the shop when I go to make something out of this. So that's one thing I definitely want you guys to do. I'm going to do a build video on whatever I decide to make out of this. So comment below what you'd like to see made out of this. If it's your first time here, please consider subscribing for future videos, because I can't wait to get this plane down in the shop. So when you make these repeat cuts without the ladder, getting it started straight can be a little tricky. I found that adjusting the bar that runs parallel with the log, that little bar in between there, make sure you just adjust that so it's sitting on the log. I also found that starting with your hand on the handle is best when you're starting the cut. And then once the cut is deep enough where your mill is completely on the log, on the flat surface, I move my hand to the round bar that runs parallel with your chainsaw bar. That's just what I found to be more comfortable for me. That may differ for someone else. Also, at the end of each cut, I move to the vertical handle as well. It's just more comfortable and safer when you finish the cut, I think. And as you see here, a wedge falls out when I take the board away, and I didn't get it on video, but I put that in about midway through the cut. This makes it a lot easier on the chainsaw. But I was pretty impressed with these cuts. The boards came off really straight and looked really nice. These middle boards at the widest were about 13 inches, just to give you an idea on the size of the slabs. And also I have a 28-inch bar on my chainsaw that I don't think I mentioned earlier. I think it's also good practice to top off your fuel and bar and chain oil after each cut. This is going to depend on the size of your slabs, obviously, but I think it's just good practice to do it after every cut. I'll show you the final pieces of lumber in a minute, but just to give you my overall thoughts on chainsaw milling, it is time consuming. Now, I knew this going in, and these spalted maple slabs weren't too bad. They probably took 5-6 minutes per slab, but I did do some larger black walnut slabs since then, and that took probably 10 to 12 minutes per slab, which running a saw wide open for that length of time has got to be absolutely terrible for it. Now, just to be fair, I am using a standard crosscut chain on this saw. They did not have a ripping chain in stock at my local Stihl dealer, so I ended up just using this. But next time I mill, I will be using a ripping chain, just to compare the two and see how a ripping chain will do. Now, hands down, a bandsaw mill is ultimately what I want for milling, and I will eventually get one. But for now, the chainsaw mill is an excellent tool to have for myself and my 12 acres of woods. It is enjoyable to do, being out there harvesting your own lumber from trees on your property, but from now on I'm going to focus on smaller lengths for my chainsaw mill. I don't like running my chainsaw that length of period of time wide open. So I'm going to focus on the range of maybe 4 feet to 8 foot max, depending on the width. So bluntly put, a chainsaw is meant for cross cutting. That's going to be my primary use, but I'll definitely be happy to keep this around for smaller slabs around my property. So I'll give you a close-up in a minute, but I loaded them in my trailer. I ended up with about 5 or 6 pieces of some really nice stuff. This wood's really going to make a really nice piece of furniture. As I said, comment below what you think I should make. I'll definitely make a video on that build. Now, as for my current drying process, I don't have a kiln or anything. That's another future build I'd like to do. I've got a lot of future stuff I'd like to do. But I do have a decent sized basement in the meantime where I store some stuff. Fortunately, it's a walk-in and has a man door down to it. And I run a dehumidifier down there 24/7, so it's super dry. So I stacked and stickered these down there a couple months ago, and being that it was a standing dead tree, they are probably okay to use right now. It's probably been dead for years, and it's been standing, so it's been up off the ground. But I'll definitely be getting a moisture gauge just to make sure what the moisture content is. But in the meantime, I got a plan what I'm going to do with them. But just look how beautiful that spalting is. It's definitely going to be awesome to create something from start to finish, from milling the boards all the way to putting the final coats of finish on it. It's going to make something truly special. So now I'll leave you with a little time lapse of how I put the chainsaw mill together in case you were to decide to get one. The directions are pretty straightforward and probably took me about 20 to 30 minutes to do so. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Do all that normal YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.